Hi, this is Kim Droptiny. I'm reading chapter 20 of Gold Cord by Amy Carmichael, prelude to chapter 20. Father, hear us, we are praying. Hear the words our hearts are saying. We are praying for our children. Keep them from the powers of evil, from the secret hidden peril. Father, hear us for our children. From the whirlpool that would suck them, from the treacherous quicksand pluck them. Father, hear us for our children. From the worldling's hollow gladness, from the sting of faithless sadness. Father, Father, keep our children. Through life's troubled waters steer them. Through life's bitter battle cheer them. Father, Father, be thou near them. Read the language of our longing. Read the wordless pleadings thronging. Holy Father, for our children, and wherever they may bide, lead them home at eventide. So, chapter 20 is titled The Children. This is not a book of flowers. It is more like a steady walk through a wood. But our Indian forests sometimes open on a sunny slope. I know a bank whereon the wild thyme grows, that kind of place. For on either side of the path, however straightly it presses on, there are ferny hollows and little flowery patches. And there are other forest ways, tiny and winding. When one comes upon them, it is impossible not to wonder whence they come and whither they go. There is always a kind of mystery about an untracked path. So here, with the children, we are among paths, and we want to follow them all. To what loving little nest among the grass does this path lead? Moonflower, 3.5 years old, was in trouble one day over a bee. It had stung her and then dashed into the flame of a lantern. Dead, and it never prayed to be forgiven, she said solemnly. Or this, so full of quick humor. The hippopotamus brought up the little girl. Sunflower's explanation to her city of her drawing of a large hippopotamus beside what was meant to represent a very little girl. It must have suddenly occurred to her that it looked like an unsafe arrangement. Perhaps the dearest of all, like banks of woodland flowers, are the stories of our children's children. Don't throw that nail down like that. And the little daughter of Vinitha, one of the first of the lotus buds, remembering her Good Friday story, took the nail that a carpenter had dropped, and another child had used as a plaything, and she kissed it. Or this, Bela's sweet lotus to her mother. The flower has at least 30 different names, so there is no confusion in Tamil, though so many of our children are called lotus. Take the bag off my thumb, please. It will not suck it any more. Followed some hours later when she felt her baby resolution failing her. Now please put the bag on again. Or this, which is about the children of Giuliani, our first surviving baby, the only Christian woman in a hard Hindu village. One day Delight, then very small, heard the bell in the idol temple near her home ring in the early morning, and she shut her eyes and covered her face as she had seen others do here, where, hour by hour, the prayer bell rings. What were you doing? Asked her mother. I was praying, said Delight, who had never been distinguished for special sanctity. For whom did you pray? Asked her mother gently. And Delight, who could not talk plainly, signified somehow that her prayer was for the people of the village who do not know our Lord Jesus. So it has become the custom of the children, Sunshine, who is 5, Pearl Boy, 4, and Delight, every time when the idol bell rings, to pray for the people of that Hindu village. Moonflower, the little one who mourned the impenitent bee, has a story that, even if it were the only one of its kind, would make the work worthwhile. She was born in a country village in a small house belonging to her grandmother. The old lady pottered about and saw to the day's cooking, and the girl mother lay in her corner, the darkest and stuffiest in the dark and stuffy house, thinking of the husband who had gone away somewhere and had not returned, and pondering a plan that was to lead to finding him if he still lived. Life was hard on her then. Who would be responsible for the children's marriage expenses if indeed he had died? Her own people were poor, as caste folk often are, and fears lay heavy on the mother's heart as she thought of the future. The only glimmer of light was a poor hope of perhaps being able by pilgrimage to many shrines to win help for him if he were ill or in trouble. One day, seductive whispers, like little winds, began to blow about her. The mother of a servant of the gods is favored of the gods, they said. Much merit is hers. No marriage expenses oppress her. Her children can never be a deserted wife or a widow. But the mother knew what lay behind the glitter of temple service. That shall never be, she said. And as soon as she could drag herself from her corner, she was up, and, with the old granny and her two children, she set off on her long journey, tired in spirit, tired in body, but brave as an Indian woman can be. Day after day, week after week, they wandered on, till the young mother's strength failed, and the baby was slowly starving in her arms. Then they came to a town. In the heart of it was set a great temple sacred to Siva, the third in the Hindu triad. Round about stood the Brahmin streets. Through the huge gates and portals they passed with their offerings of fruit and flowers, and what silver coins they could spare. They prostrated themselves before the shrine. With hands outstretched they worshipped, and turned away, worn out, almost penniless, uncomforted. Nearby were temple women's houses. A widow, or a deserted wife, if she be of good caste and has pretty children, is always sure of a welcome in such houses. The old granny knew this. The young mother knew it too, but they never considered going there. They went on to the government hospital, for the mother was too ill to walk further. The baby, too, was ill. The mother, true to her training, thought first of her husband. The pilgrimage could not be interrupted, and there was still more shrines to visit. But the baby would die if she took it with her. Then the nurse offered to take it and care for it as her own. And the mother, seeing in this offer the only chance for its life, consented. But she did all she knew. On a thin slip of palm leaf, she had a statement written with an iron style, and the scored words were rubbed over with saffron to make them indelible. The little one was to be properly cared for, educated, and never given to the temple or any other evil. There is no record of what that mother felt, but we who have seen one like her compelled, by the hard unwritten laws of her land, to choose between two evils and know no other choice. We who have seen her raise her hands to heaven in one last mute protest, one dumb plea, we know how it must have been with that mother as she turned her back on the hospital and slowly walked down the long street, with the other child clinging to her sari, and the old granny, mournfully mumbling prayers, following wearily. The nurse watched the three forlorn figures as they faded out of sight, and then she broke her promise. And the cold gods looked on with their cold stone eyes as the little living child was made theirs. But there is a God in heaven. That mother's cry had entered into his ears. Within a week, that little child was safe in Donapur. And now she is Moonflower. And as you watch her, with her diminutive garment of washed out blue carefully tucked up, carrying, with another elfin creature's help, a bucket of water for the flowers, or sweeping withered leaves from the path with a grass broom, or down on her knees scrubbing the red tiles of her nursery floor. You think of that mother and of her prayer to the unknown God, and everything in you is glad that He is not far from any one of us. He was not far from the sorrowful child who stood alone in a room whose only door was shut and locked. There was no window in the room, so it was quite dark. But Pink Lotus was not so much afraid of darkness as of light. With the opening of that door, her father would come into the room and command her to do what she could not do. No, she would die first. She had promised the mother, who had been carried out of that room only a week before, that she would be good. This that her father commanded was bad. But one day he might force her to go to the hated temple. There was only one way of escape. In the courtyard of the house was a deep well. She had often looked into its black depths. Deep, deep down there was a little sparkle of light in the blackness. Better the well than the temple. At last, tired out with longings for her mother and fear of her father, Pink Lotus fell into a troubled sleep. But she was soon awakened. The door creaked on its hinges. The light that she dreaded pricked her shut eyes. She sprang up and stood before her father, trembling. "Pink Lotus," he said, raising his arm threateningly, "the priest demands thee. Thou must obey." And when she refused, he struck her down. This was repeated. Day after day there was the question, the refusal, the blow, till one day instead of the blow came a young man with a pleasant face. Pink Lotus hardly dared to raise her eyes to him, nor was it required that she should. "I have found a bridegroom for thee," said her father. "Thou shalt be free from that other. This is what is written in thy forehead." And gratefully she accepted so blessed an alternative. The marriage was duly performed. No ceremony of importance was omitted. Content, unspeakably happy, and quite unsuspicious, even though the wedding had been singular in quietness and quickness, Pink Lotus went to her new home. But there was something strange about that home. It was not as other homes. There was no mother-in-law. No relative appeared. No one came near her but an old woman who cooked for her. And Rama, her husband, was often away. Business called him, he said. They lived in a city, and its ways were unknown to her. Business doubtless did call husbands away. Sometimes this kind husband took his bride for a drive in his car, and he gave her beautiful jewels. She had all that she could wish, except just a little more of her husband, whom she soon learned to love dearly. But one day he dropped something when he left her. It was a letter. Pink Lotus had learned to read. She had never been taught that she should not read the letters of another, and innocently she read that letter through, at first without clear understanding. Then soon its full meaning flashed on her mind. It was from her husband's wife, his real wife. She was not his wife, not even his legal second wife. Her wedding had been a mockery. What that loving girl endured during the next 2 or 3 days that passed before Rama returned, we can only gather because of what we know she endured afterwards. When he came next, she took off her tali, the gold marriage token that she wore around her neck. She gave it to him. "It is not mine," she said simply. "You are wronging her, your real wife." But the words must have torn her heart. He fell on his knees, imploring her to keep it. He had been married against his will. This, his marriage to her, was his true marriage. She only was his beloved. But nothing could move that resolute will. She knew of no God to whom to pray, for the God whom she had been taught to worship was he who had demanded a far more evil thing than this, or so she believed, for so she had been told. She prayed no prayer in words. She dared not frame a prayer, but her heart cried out for help. There is a word in our scriptures about the widow and the fatherless child. If thou afflict them in any wise, and they cry at all unto me, I will surely hear their cry. Pink Lotus, motherless, was more bereft than if she had been fatherless. She did not know how to cry in the great way of prayer. But if they cry at all, surely love could go no further. O power of the unseen world, how tender you are! Already help was commanded. In that great city of many sins and griefs was an American woman, wise and pitiful. She heard of this poor little pink lotus and worked for her salvation. A few weeks later, a letter came to Donapur asking if we would take a lotus bud, trodden into the mire, but pure of spirit. We do not, as a rule, take any but little children, but who could refuse a story like this? So she was brought to us, a lovely thing in jewels and soft pink-colored garments. And when we saw her for the first time by the clear waters of a mountain river, for we were with the children on the hills near Donapur at the time, we could only think of the flower whose name we have given her here, the lotus of our temple pools. She had never seen running water, and as she delicately stepped in and followed the little blue-clad girls who were wading and splashing joyfully, we did not wonder that a butterfly mistook her for a flower and lighted on her hair. Water with golden lights upon it, the dancing blue, the great crimson and black butterfly fluttering over that radiant pink lotus, and all around the green of the forest. Could there have been a brighter or more serene beginning? But soon she began to suffer keenly. Terrible waves can roll up and sweep over such a soul when the first relief of safety has had time to pass. Like a bird with a broken wing, like any desolate thing that heart can imagine, she lived for many months among us, turning on her new world great sad eyes. Then illness came to make life harder, and sometimes she all but gave way. But in the end, there was deliverance and peace. And now the pent-up energies of love have been set free in the service of the sick and sorrowful who come to Donapur, for Pink Lotus is one of our nurse evangelists. End of chapter 20. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you.